How many of you have ever used the phrase holy cow? Anyone ever used that? The holy cow, we say that at different times in different situations, right? And holy cow is a very common phrase. And you and I, we've been in big events throughout Scripture. And last week we looked at the Israelites at Mount Sinai, do you remember? And God told Moses, you call those people together and you give them these instructions. And in chapter 19, Moses begins to give them the instructions from God. And the people respond, we will do everything the Lord has commanded. We will do everything He says, right? And then God speaks the Ten Commandments to Moses and the people there in chapter 20. And you and I looked at those 10 commandments. And we are going to look at Exodus chapter 32 as we begin the key events in Scripture this year. And in chapter 32, we experience a group of people who were saying, holy cow. And we think, how can people come to this place in life? But let me just share with you that this happens today. People worship things like cows today. Did you know that? I have friends that have done missions work in India, both long-term and short-term missions in India. And one thing that they've come back sharing is that there is a massive population in India of cows. And they do life among the common people. Did you know that? If you were to go to some of the key cities in India, you would find that cows roam about with people. And traffic is stopped so that cows can cross the road. It's serious. There are laws, according to Article 48 in the Constitution of India, cows cannot be used for beef. Cows cannot be destroyed. And there are laws that actually, if you do that, you will face death in some states in India. It's absolutely true, and here's why they worship cows. They believe they're sacred. They believe they're sacred. In fact, one picture is going to come up where you're going to see worshiping of a cow. This goes on in India today. And they're worshiping this cow. They believe that they're sacred. It's associated, the cow is associated with the false god Krishna. Krishna is going to come up on the screen right here in the bottom left corner. Krishna is considered the 8th avatar or 8th incarnation of the false god Vishnu. I mean, this is serious stuff that goes on in our world today. And we think people don't worship cows today. Yes, they do. People do worship things like cows. They consider them sacred and holy and deity. And they are worshiping what has been created rather than the Creator. Holy cow. And as you and I jump into chapter 32 of Exodus, it doesn't just happen today. It happened way back in Old Testament history when Moses was leading the people. It says this in chapter 32, verse 1. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come make us gods who will go before us. And as for this fellow Moses who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Now, pay attention to a couple of things they say here. People saw that Moses was so what? Long in coming. He's been gone a long time. And as for Moses, this guy that brought us out of Egypt, we don't even know what happened to him. Anyone know how long it's been since they've seen Moses? Turn to chapter 24, verse 18 with me. Moses, if you remember, he receives the 10 Commandments in chapter 20. Then God calls him up on the mountain. He's going to write the 10 Commandments. He gives him all kinds of laws, social laws. He gives him community laws, how to build the tabernacle on the mountain. He gives him all of these things, instructions about the way people are to live. And in chapter 24, verse 18, notice what it says. Then Moses entered the cloud, and he went on up the mountain. And he stayed on the mountain, how long? 40 days and 40 nights. A month and 10 days. Now, if you add a month and 10 days to what we noticed last week, that we're talking just a few months into this journey where they've been rescued out of slavery in Egypt. And already in a very short period of time, they're saying, hey, it's been so long. We don't know what happened to our leader Moses. Why don't you, Aaron? Who was Aaron? And he was also selected to be the priest. Yes, the spokesperson. And the priest of God's people. And a priest was to lead people in how to live for God. And here's Aaron. Hey, let's gather around Aaron. Let's ask him, why don't you make us gods that we can worship? Because we don't know what happened to this guy Moses who brought us out of Egypt. Well, Aaron, look at how he answers in verse 2. He says, take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing. Now, I'm glad that we don't have any young boys in here today because I was afraid what was going to happen. Well, we do, actually. Gabriel looked at me and said, wait a minute, I'm still young. But Gabriel, listen, don't go home and tell Dad I said you can go get your ears pierced, okay? That's not what I'm leading you to here. But the fact is, boys had their ears pierced. Girls, the wives. And he says, give me the gold. You give me those earrings, right? And bring them to me. So all the people, they took off their earrings and they brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and he made it into an idol, cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. In other words, when Aaron made this, he took his time. He put in a lot of effort on making this calf. That's going to be really important for us to notice, church. Hold on to that. So Aaron, he took it, he made it into an idol, cast it in the shape of a calf, fashioned it with a tool. Then they said, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt. Man, we're talking just a few months have passed. Not very long. They saw the hand of God so powerfully on them when He took them out of Egypt under the bondage of slavery and brought them across the Red Sea. A wall of water on one side, a wall of water on the other. We said, could you imagine what that was like? More than 1 million people crossing over into the desert. And God brought every one of them across safely, protecting them and providing for them, because we noticed that God also provided bread in the morning and quail at night. Bread fell from heaven, and it was sweet like wafers. I mean, can you imagine what that was like? And yet here they are. We have no idea where Moses is. In other words, we have no idea what's happened to our God. He's no longer with us, right? Well, wrong. God was right there. And they had their hand in the face of God already just a few months later. And here they've gone to Aaron, and Aaron is misleading the people. So when Aaron saw this, verse 5, he built an altar in front of the calf, and he announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. Lord, capital L, to the Master. And he's already replacing the God of all creation with an idol. Do you remember what the first two commandments were in Exodus 23 and 4? You shall have no other God before me. Why? Because there is no other. There is no other God. And you shall not cast for yourself anything in the image of God. You shall not bow down to it. You shall not worship it. That's command number 2. And here it is. They've already broken the first two commandments that have everything to do with their relationship with the Almighty Creator of all creation. Well, it says that he makes this festival to the Lord in verse 6. So the next day the people rose early, and they sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. And afterward they sat down to eat and to drink, and got up to indulge in revelry. That word revelry is a really interesting word in the Hebrew. It means to get up and laugh uncontrollably, or to pursue unbridled entertainment. To make sport of is another word, or here you go, here's a fourth word for you, to caress. That means that the revelry that was going on didn't just include laughing and dancing and singing and jumping for joy and entertaining yourself to make sport. It also carries with it the idea of sexual immorality in worship. It's a really powerful word. In other words, anything was going in that community. Anything went. And God's going to use some other words to describe the Israelites at this particular time. Look, notice verse 7 with me. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people..." Did you catch that? I've circled that in my Bible. Because God switches from my people, who I've rescued out of Egypt, to these can't be my people. Because they don't act like my people. They're not living the way they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be set apart. Nations are supposed to be able to see they follow the one true God. And so they're not my people. Moses, they're your people. You go down to your people who you brought out of Egypt. Because I am sick of them. You go down to them, God says. And He says, they have become corrupt. They are filled with evil. They are so depraved. In fact, that word corrupt carries the idea of spiritual death. They're walking dead. They are so corrupt. They have become quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Now I have seen these people, the Lord said to Moses. They are a stiff-necked people. You ever said that to somebody? You're so stiff-necked. You know, when we were kids, that was a common phrase. We don't use that anymore. We say, "You're stubborn." You're stubborn as all get out. Anyone tried to train a stubborn animal? Maybe a dog or a horse. I've seen people train horses. Some of them are so stubborn. And God is saying this is a stiff-necked people. They are people that are not looking for guidance or direction. They are not people who are willing to allow me to guide them. You know that we have a free will. They had a free will. If we go all the way back to our first sermon series of the year, in the beginning, and we talk about Adam and Eve, there's something about that creation account that God says to Adam. Do you remember? You are free to eat from any of the trees in the garden, but not this tree. You are free. Did you notice that? There's a free will, and Adam had a decision to make, and Adam made a decision that allowed sin and corruption to enter his life. And guess what? We have free will. We are free to do what is right in the eyes of the Lord, and we are free to do what is wrong. And God's not going to twist our arm, church. He's not going to make us do it. He wants us to love Him and follow Him because we desire Him, not because He forces us. We have children. Amy and I have 4 kids. I have never beat my kids to make them say, "I love you." I want my kids to love me willingly. Don't you, parents? I'll never twist their arms. I guess Lyndon's beat Gabe a few times. Gabe, we'll tell your story next week now. You know what? We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't twist their arm. But isn't it such a blessing when our kids say, "Mom, Dad, I love you," and it's willing? And isn't it a blessing when they obey us? Because then they say, I love you and I trust you. I trust your direction and your guidance in my life. The Israelites expressed their free will and said, "You know what? God's not enough. I need more." And every one of us in this room have done the same thing, haven't we? At times we've fashioned idols in our life, and you say, "Man, I don't follow holy cows." Yeah, but what is it that we follow? What is it that we have that is in the way of our relationship, that we pursue, that we focus on way too much? Because those things become holy cows in our life, don't they? God, He was saying these people can't even be led. They're so stubborn, stiff-necked. Verse 10, "Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." Who did God make that promise to first? "I will make you into a great nation"? Abraham. Well, this nation isn't working out, right? I've made them into a great nation. They've seen my powerful hand on them, and look at the way they respond to me. I'm so sick of this. You know what I'll do, Moses? I'm going to wipe them out and I'll create a new nation with you. You know what would have happened if God did that? They would have expressed their free will at some point, right? And Moses makes that clear. Look, you made a promise to Abraham and Isaac and to Jacob, my ancestors. And God relents and he has Moses confront the people, doesn't he? Aren't you grateful that God is a God who relents? Because he has righteous anger. When God gets angry, it's for all the right reasons. And when he reacts out of anger, when he responds out of anger, it's for all the right reasons, isn't it? God has a right to do with his creation what he does with it. And we need to understand and we need to accept that. Because we hear stories like this and we go, holy cow, could this even be true? Yes. This is a real event in human history, a key event that we need to stop saying, can that really be true? We need to say, man, this really happened. And if it happened then, it can happen today. We see the human race hasn't changed. We let God down. Look what God does. I'm going to jump all the way over to verse 15. It says this, Moses turned and he went down the mountain with the 2 tablets. Remember, he's got the first 2 tablets ever created. And it says he went down with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God, engraved on the 2 tablets. And when Joshua had been on the mountain with Moses, remember? And then Moses goes up into the cloud. When Joshua, who was coming back down with him, heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, there's the sound of war in the camp. People have come to attack our people. We've been gone. Guess what? They're at war. And look at what Moses says. He says, it is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. It is the sound of singing that I hear. It is the sound of singing. And when Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf they had made, and he burned it in the fire. Then he ground it into powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. You want to consume other gods? Here's what it's worth. This God is only worth being burned in a fire, being ground into dust, and you drinking it. And I can't help but think, there aren't many notes on this particular verse, but I can't help but think that what Moses is trying to get across here is your appetite to follow the wrong things is making God sick. You know the same is true for us. The appetite we have for more and more in our culture today is making God sick because we put so many things between us and him. And he said to Aaron, verse 21, what did these people do to you that you led them into such great sin? And what a great question, because what he does is he holds accountability with Aaron, right? Listen, older brother, what are you doing? You're supposed to be leading people in the instruction of God. What did they do that you led them into such great sin, leading them away from God? And Aaron's response, do not be angry, my lord, Aaron answered. You know how prone these people are to evil. In other words, it's not my fault, it's theirs. They said to me, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. So I told them, whoever has any gold jewelry, take it off. Then they gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came a calf. Is that the way it worked, church? No. No, see, I didn't do it. They made me do it. And what happened really was I threw it into the fire, and bam, right here was just a calf. No, Aaron spent a lot of time fashioning this calf. He made this idol for them. And not only that, when he made it and he got called out, he had a lack of accountability in his life, and he just tried to explain sin away. And we can't do that anymore. We can't do it in our church. We can't do it in our families. We can't do it in our marriages anymore. We cannot do it with our kids. We have to be accountable in our culture again. And for those of us who follow Jesus Christ, man, God is calling our feet to the carpet today. That we can't be like Aaron and say, it's not my fault, it's theirs. And look, it just boom, it just happened. I just woke up one day and there was sin in my life. And now it's impacting others. And God didn't allow Aaron to get away with that excuse, did he? In fact, there's great judgment that takes place here. It's really ugly, and it really shows us how ugly sin is, because what Moses says is, he says, look, if you're on the side of God, you come over here with me. And if you're on the side of evil, you just stay where you're at, right? And notice what happens. People cross over. All the Levites cross over with Aaron, right? They cross that line. And they say, you know what? I don't want to live like this. And they come over to the side of Moses. And Moses says, strap on the sword. And you go out through the camp from one side to the other. And this is an ugly, graphic, real-life event where God says you go and you remove your brother. You go and remove family. You go and remove people who are ungodly. You purge the ungodliness from this community. And God has a right to remove evil, doesn't he? God has that right. And we read this and we go, how can God do that? Because God doesn't like evil. He doesn't like the damage that sin does in our life. And the 3,000 people that died by the sword that day, it's a picture of how quickly God wants to deal with sin in your life and in mine, because it does tons of damage. And it doesn't stop there. He removes the evil through people, and then he removes evil through a plague. And God deals with the people, and out of that, he purges some of the evil from the community, not all of it. I'm here to tell you that if God would have purged all the evil out of the world at that point, it would have been much, much uglier. God is trying to get our attention today, church. He's trying to share with us how dark and how damaging sin really is in our lives, in our relationships, in our marriages, our families, and how much it damages other people around us. We have new core values, I said earlier. These core values just made me think this week as I was reading this. What did the people value? We all, whether we have them written down or not, you know we have core values in our life. We have things that guide us, things that we make decisions based on. And even if they're not written down, we have a value system. Well, here at Remedy Christian Church, we have values. Values are who you are, by the way. And last week I shared with you our new mission statement.